Protesters flood the UIC pavilion, forcing Donald Trump to cancel his rally. Good evening, I'm Jeff Herndon.
And I'm Dawn Hasbrook. The shutdown turns into a showdown on the streets of Chicago. Thousands of Trump supporters spilled out into the street outside the pavilion tonight, where protesters were gathered on the other side of the street. Chicago police found themselves in the middle of a tense standoff. The tension started to build this afternoon as people gathered for that rally. Protesters ended up with tickets, and many said they were going to crash the party. Frustrations flared, forcing the Trump camp to call off the rally. And that is when the sparks and punches began flying.
And the protests, while not as big or angry, continue tonight. You can see a small group of people have moved from the UIC pavilion to the Trump Tower. We have a series of live reports from both inside and outside the UIC. Our political editor, Mike Flannery, was on the floor of the pavilion when the fights broke out. Mike, what started all of this?
Trump supporters, Jeff, say that it was a mob that got out of control and deprived the candidate of his right to free speech. The protesters insist it was Trump's own rhetoric that brought this down on him tonight. It was ugly. Angry chants of "let them stay" erupted every time Trump campaign security removed protesters from the pavilion. It was soon clear, though, that hundreds, perhaps more than 1,000 anti-Trump demonstrators had gotten into the hall, some even getting up on the podium. As the confrontation grew uglier, the Trump campaign announced the candidate would not be appearing, citing public safety. At that point, though, punches were thrown on both sides.
He should not be howling in my ear as an American. If I would hit him, I would be responsible for it. If he would hit me, he wouldn't.
Donald Trump, he's preaching hate. He's preaching division. He's going to make our country more divided than it already is.
And I feel very sad today that here in the USA, Trump could not speak. I think this is just outrageous.
I wish Mr. Trump came, but I understand why he didn't. He did it for the safety of every single person in here.
Protesters, of course, were jubilant after shutting Trump down tonight, many of them vowing, Jeff and Dawn, they plan to do it again and again. Back to you.
All right, Mike Flannery, thank you. Well, our Dane Placco continues the story outside the pavilion tonight. Dane.
Don, a much quieter scene here right now than it was a couple hours ago. In fact, they've managed to reopen both Racine and Harrison streets, which were closed for several hours. Most of the police have left, as have most of the protesters, but not before declaring this a major victory. Jubilation for Donald Trump protesters, anger and frustration for those who came to hear him speak.
I just feel like, if you don't support somebody, that's fine, then don't vote for him, but don't prevent the opportunity for the rest of us to listen to the man speak.
At first, the huge crowd outside the UIC pavilion was unaware the rally had been canceled. But as the doors opened, Trump supporters suddenly found themselves in the middle of an unwelcome and sometimes hostile celebration.
I feel very disappointed that the political process is being subverted by those who would engage in unpeaceful protest.
He came into the belly of the beast with Bill Ayers' neighborhood being right here. He should have held it over at Rosemont, which would have been a better choice for him.
The potential for trouble was evident hours before the rally was supposed to start. A large percentage of the ticketed crowd standing in line to get in were clearly angry with Trump.
So we're going to go in there and be vocal and let the people know what's going on. Because Trump, you can't hide us here in Chi-Town.
And hours later, they achieved their goal, silencing Donald Trump for one night at least.
I think the fact that it was canceled really shows what the city of Chicago can do when people put their minds together. The fact that I see so many young people here, I see so many youth here, it just really empowers me.
If you support support Trump, go out and vote, because this is what we're fighting against. We're fighting against those who would squash free speech.
Just checked with News Affairs. They still don't know or don't have any numbers as to whether any people were arrested here tonight. As chaotic as this scene was, and you saw in that video there just how crazy it was, we did actually see one Trump protester, an elderly woman, leaving the UIC pavilion. She was getting jostled around, and a couple of Trump protesters actually came to her aid, grabbed her by the shoulders and helped walk her outside the perimeter of the craziness. So there was some help going on here, but it was a very, very tense scene for some time, as you saw there, Jeff. Back to you.
All right, Dane Placco live outside UIC Pavilion tonight.